Welcome back to Goliath. Today we're going to be going over putting credentials on your devices using the shell and using goliothctl, which is our command line tool. Mike, what does it take to put credentials onto devices?
Well, so anyone that did the getting started examples with Goliath, you put those in a conf file and then you build your firmware. And the problem is then your encryption keys for that board are in that piece of firmware. What if you want to put it on another board? And this is always a problem with IoT devices where you need different set of keys for different items. So that's why I'm really excited that we have these new features that give you two other options to put them on there. One of them is a device shell. So you can actually open a serial connection to the device and type some easy commands in order to give it an identity and a pre-shared key. And then the other one is a very slick command line tool that will look up the credentials from the Golioth cloud and automatically write them to your device for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the point about having your credentials online too, like this is something, you see this in the news or other people, like people putting their credentials into a repository or something like that. This just kind of removes that from the equation entirely.
Yeah, so I could see like you shipping a device to a customer that had like some power on self-test type of firmware on it, but no keys. And then the customer could put their own keys on it. And then as soon as that connects to Goliath, it could say, okay, here I am, give me my actual firmware. You could do a device firmware update over the air right then. It's a very slick way to bring up hardware.
Great. So what does it take to actually get started doing this?
So if you want to try this out, you should really just go to our samples that are in the Golioth Zephyr SDK. I have that page up right here, but it's the main tool chain. If you've already installed the tool chain, which if you go to docs.goliath.io, it's got instructions for that. They'll be in your Goliath, sorry, it's modules lib Goliath samples settings directory. And you can just compile this and run it on your devices. I'm doing that right now with an NRF91 board. This is a Nordic cellular board right here, and it's already connected, but you can see I'm failing to send my logging messages to Goliath because I don't have any keys on here. And if I do a get command for like the PSK ID, it'll tell me that that setting's not found. So in this case, I'm just going to go to my Golioth console right here, and I'm going to pick out my device, NRF device, and I have credentials right here, and you can see here's my identity, and here is my pre-shared key. I used a really difficult pre-shared key there, and so I will go back, and before I used get to display that, now I'm going to use set. This is the PSK ID or the identity. I'm going to set that, and you can see, all right, now that's set. The next thing that I need is the key itself. So I'm going to copy that, and we'll do almost the same thing, but now it's just the PSK without the PSK ID. And now, in order for those to take effect, we actually need to reboot the board. I can do this by going kernel reboot. I think warm will work. There's warm and cold. I'm wondering what will take the least amount of time to connect back to the cell network. So we should see as soon as this connects to the cell network, it being able to talk to Goliath. But I'm very excited about this for a couple reasons. Like think about, yes, sending it to your customer and having them put their keys on it. But you think, oh, well, they have to have serial terminal and type commands in there. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to do this with web USB. So you can actually have a portal specifically for your device. Maybe the customer puts in the serial number and it gets provisioned that way. But there should be a slick customer/user facing way of doing this. And I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's really amazing. What another point I wanted to point out here too is that you were connected. Sometimes there's multiple layers of credentialing that you might need, less so with cellular, but you were connected to the cellular network before. But it was just that you didn't have the Goliath credentials, so it was hitting our server saying, "Hey, let me in, let me give you my data," but we didn't have the PSK ID set up there, right?
Right. And Goliath is secure by default. So we're using the DTLS layer. So everything that's communicating back and forth between the device and the Goliath cloud is encrypted. And it looks like looking at my terminal now, we did connect to it, and you can see we're sending the hello messages there. If we go into our logs, we can see hello 1, hello 2, and those are what's coming up right there. So we made that connection. Yeah, so excellent. We got that going.
Yeah,
Should we do
that was awesome.
another demo? I'd like to show off the command line tools. So Do you want to maybe just describe a little bit about what goliothctl is, Chris?
Right. So a lot of people getting started with Goliath, they don't go straight to the command line tools. Most people are kind of going into the console, like Mike's showing here. It's a friendly graphical user interface. But everything you can do on the Goliath console is built on top of a REST API, and everything can talk to that. You can talk to that from your computer, from a verified terminal, like Mike's going to be showing here, and talk to that REST API in order to use the localized tools that can then validate onto the network, figure out what devices you might have, and then even things like pulling LightDB state information, posting LightDB state information. You can do a lot of that stuff from the Goliath command line tools and monitor things and build up your own tooling around it if you're in a production environment, for example, or if you say you just wanted to program, maybe your users wanted to program things at home. So the Goliath command line tool really allows that sort of thing to happen.
Yeah, and so in this case, I'm at the shell here just to show you that we're also not being able to talk to Goliath right now. But I'm going to use this command line tool, which is goliothctl device config. And then we need to give it a couple things. We need to give it a device name, which I will get in just a minute, and a port, which I just happen to know this one is USB 0. But if we go back to our devices, I have a second device here, ESP32
Okay, so this
settings.
is different than the so this is not cellular now. This is now Wi-Fi. Is that right?
Yep, and it's already connected to Wi-Fi, but still it can't talk to Goliath because it needs that pre-shared key that handles the encryption layer with the Goliath cloud. So in this case, I don't need to look up credentials. I need to have them. They need to be there. But one of the things where you can make a mistake is by copying the credentials. Like if you leave out a character at the end or you add a space or something, that can be a problem. And so I really like this workflow because all we need to do is get the device name right here. And if you get the device name wrong, it'll tell you like, hey, that is not the device name that you're looking for. So I can go back here. I just had this in as a placeholder. And if I go ahead and put the device name on and hit it, it will say no devices found with that name. That is because I am not logged into the right project.
Yeah. Right, and so this is something as well where we basically firewall off different projects. Say you're a consultant and you were looking to you had 5 different companies that you're working for. You want to probably firewall off each client from one another, and you can do it with projects here, like Mike's showing. But then if you're in a different, once you're in the project, then you can actually look up and say, oh, there's actually 10 devices in the TTGo project, like Mike's showing here, and you might want to show that sort of thing.
Right, and so I could switch projects with what my command line tool is. You can see here are the projects that I have, and it's telling me that this TTGo demo, which is a ESP style board, is the project that I'm actually in. Instead of switching that, I'm just going to switch the device name, and we'll see that should work automatically. And now it's going to go out, and it said, so it went out and it found the credentials. It tried to compare them with what was on the device, and it said it couldn't find them. And so it said, all right, well, I'm gonna write that. And so it wrote that successfully. It was looking for the other setting right here, and it didn't find it. And I'm actually using the super strong credential of password for this device. It's just a test device. So it's telling us that was set as well. And if we go back and look now at the terminal, we should see that we're already up to saying hello number 41. And we can go back in and look at our device logs here, and we can see hello 40, hello 41, hello 42 that match the timestamp right here. Now, the other thing that I really like about this, Chris, is that if you do the same command again, this command to set the devices, it will actually confirm to you the device is already set to this ID and the device is already set to this password, which is pretty awesome. Now, I've used this command line tool before for batch provisioning of devices. So I've actually added the device name, added the device credentials, and then now with this command as well, you could then set those credentials to the device all at the same time. So if you had, 40 of these boards that you needed to stand up in some installation, you could literally just go one after the other, plug it in, run the script, plug it in, run the script, and get this all to be done automatically.
Great. Yeah, and could you just walk us back through one more time? So when you're running this command on the command line, it's basically going out, it's looking up the project, the device name, and then it's assigning credentials. Could you just step us through that real quick?
Yeah, so it's good to go and look whatever device that you choose. Here's my list of devices here. If I grab, the dev board one is the one that I grabbed before. here's our device name right there. So that is the only thing that you need to tell the command line tool for it to go out and look up the credentials that are on this device. So you can see in the console, I already have this set of credentials right here. And then when I pass that as the command line argument, right here is the name of the device, it's going to go out to the project that goliothctl is currently operating on and say, hey, do you have this device called devboard1? And the cloud will say, yes, I do. And then it'll say, okay, great, I need the credentials. It then takes the credentials and it shoots them through this port onto the device where they're stored. And I guess the other thing to understand, if you're not familiar with the settings subsystem of Zephyr, it actually uses a partition of flash memory that is persistent. And so if you do a firmware upgrade, it's not going to overwrite that. So those keys are going to be stored through power cycles and through firmware upgrade, which is really exciting.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I think the disconnect that people might have right now is that you do need to have this firmware image already on your device. Like you said, you might be at the factory, you might have kind of this starter firmware on there, but then you run this command and it basically provisions everything and says we're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that idea of that starter firmware, if you have device firmware update set up with your device and it's already looking for a new version of the firmware, as soon as it logs onto Golioth, it's going to say, hey, I'm alive. What version of firmware should I be running? And if on the console you've enabled a new version, it will then download that. So it just opens up the ability, I think, for us to take the manufacturing step and like the finished with encryption keys ready to go step and kind of separate those for whatever workflow you need.
Yeah. I think hearing the horror stories of spreadsheets and keys being passed across different countries and a CSV, it's like, oh wow, this is just a much better way to do things, and much safer, much simpler, and much more secure. So I'm excited about that. Anything else we should be knowing about adding credentials to a device, Mike?
I don't think so, but I bet we're going to be back pretty soon with some additions to this, just because there are so many exciting things around it. Like I teased before, the web USB part of it. I also think that there's probably nothing blocking us from having our own settings for your app. So like here we're setting the credentials, but you could set like the background color of the screen or the size of the font or the range of temperatures or the unit of temperatures. You should be able to do settings like that from here. And it is also possible to act on those settings from like observed state on like DB state. So I think that this is kind of like a playground of Zephyr just waiting for us in this settings subsystem. And this is just one really cool part of it that we showed you today.
Yeah, no, this has been great. So thanks for telling us about this, and we're looking forward to those future videos.